Hi, and welcome to the Cornelius Seed Podcast. Thank you for checking out our podcast. Established in 1935, we're an American-owned and family-owned independent seed company. And we're excited to partner with you in our new podcast by bringing you 5 generations of agricultural experience and decades of industry expertise. In our podcasts, you can expect to gain valuable and timely information to aid you in making decisions for your operation. We'll keep things simple and informative, and much like our motto, Planet Profit. Hi, and thanks for joining us. This is Juan Camacho, Cornelius Seed Innovation Lead, and I'm joined by Craig Allaman, our lead agronomist. In today's episode, we're going to talk about insect pressure, volunteer corn, and our thoughts around managing these two challenges. Well, it's definitely safe to say that winter's definitely here. Here in Jackson County, Iowa, and really across a large swath of Cornelius country, we've had a significant and prolonged snow cover this season. As we start thinking about insect pressure, will we be able to count on a big insect kill this year? Why or why not?
Well, when we think about the last week that we went through, and we've got a couple more days here of this sub-zero weather, a person would think that, that's going to give us a pretty good deep freeze into the soil, possibly kill some of those insects that overwinter, that we deal with on a yearly basis, like white grub, rootworm larvae, things like that. But unfortunately, when this week got here, we had a pretty significant snow cover in most of our area. And I know there are a few that did not have that, but it's no different than the insulation in our walls. That insulation is there, and therefore it keeps us warm on the inside of the house. And with that snow layer there, it acts as insulation to the cold that we've had. And so even though we have that, week, 10 days, 2 weeks of really cold weather, we're not actually penetrating into the soil and getting a deep frost that would possibly kill those insects. I know I talked to several farmers that have done some fence work, maybe working on a corral, but getting some posts stuck in the ground here in the month of January. And that's pretty unusual. They've had a little frost to fight to get through, but it really wasn't very deep, and they've actually been able to do some of that work. So that tells me that the frost wasn't real deep before we hit this cold stretch. And the other thing is, even if you're in an area that maybe has had less snow and you feel like your frost is getting deeper, if you'll remember, we had a pretty good late summer drought last year. So, started in mid-July there. In the month of August, we really didn't have much rain anywhere. And as you were out scouting your fields and seeing how your crop was maturing, there was a lot of cracks in the ground. Well, that's the time of the year. That's the month. August is probably the biggest month when we get adult rootworm beetles and Japanese beetles, which are a white grub. They turn into a white grub when they lay their egg in the soil. June beetles, things like that. They were able to get down in those cracks, get really deep before they laid their eggs. So that's going to give them advantage to be able to withstand some colder weather because they probably got their egg laying done at a deeper level than normal. So my estimation, my educated guess will be that we really probably didn't kill a whole lot of insects this winter. And so next year we would be looking at it at least an average normal amount of insect pressure, and possibly even a little bit higher pressure than normal because of the way our winter shaped up for us.
Well, that makes sense. Just when you tie those two things together, another thing to consider is with the higher commodity prices. When you take that into the equation, how can that help with our control mechanisms and if they're paying off or not?
Well, what we try to do, we'll get our scouting calendars out. Our customers are pretty versed on doing this during the summer, and we know what time of the year we need to look for what insect. But when we look to see if we have hit a threshold where we would spray, part of that threshold is the amount of insects out there and or the amount of feeding they've done on the crop. And then you're kind of taking that and multiplying that by the cost of the control. So the insecticide that we would be spraying to control that. And then also then the price that you're going to get per bushel. So, if you're going to potentially protect 10 bushel to the acre, at $3 corn, that's a lot different than protecting 10 bushel of the acre at $4.50 corn. So, that's part of the equation that changes when we have higher commodity prices or even higher yield potential. You have to kind of figure that all in there. So it's going to be, that trigger will be less insect damage and less insect feeding will pay to spray this year if the prices continue to hold.
And that makes sense. I think it seems like, planning is the name of the game. And let's switch gears to planning for volunteer corn. Now, we all know that those wind events from 2020, derecho, et cetera, in particular the down corn, we anticipated that those areas that were hardest hit would have a big challenge with volunteer corn this year. Now, I know a lot of guys, the plan was to plow that corn under in hopes that the seed would germinate in the fall and not this spring. So while we all hope that the plan works as designed for the sake of not being underprepared, in case there are large quantities of corn seed still viable, what can we plan to use for control both in soybeans and continuous corn operations?
Yeah, and corn on corn or volunteer corn, whether it's in corn on corn environment or corn on soybeans, is always something that we've got on our mind. It's part of our planning because corn can be a very competitive crop. The volunteer corn can with the crop that we have planted out there in the field, whether that be beans or corn. And so, we can see a 10-20% yield reduction if we don't address that and we have a fairly heavy population. But here in 2021, we had not only the derecho issue, so we've just directly put that entire crop back into the ground, but we had a lot of outlying areas that had some green snap, had some lodging, so not only do we have some volunteer corn on the ground, maybe that the combine threw shatter at the head or something or went through the combine, but we've got a lot of ears laying out there on the ground. That's going to result in big clumps, which are always more competitive and more yield robbing in volunteer corn. We've got a couple of things, maybe not new just this year, but pretty new that we kind of need to talk about, and in soybeans, we've always had the post-grass chemicals like the Select and Assure 2 and Fusilade and Post Plus. Those have always been our standard volunteer corn control products. But now as we have a fair amount of the Enlist program out there on the market and even the Extend Flex programs that we can use Liberty in, so that gives us another tool. If we have planted conventional corn in 2020, the previous year, or double pro corn, which neither one of those will have tolerance to Liberty. So if we get volunteer corn now in 2021 and we have the Enlist or the Extend Flex product out there, when we spray the Liberty this year, post-applied, when that volunteer corn is already up, we're going to be able to control it with that Liberty application. So, maybe we don't have to add that grass product, add that extra cost to our program, and are going to be able to control the volunteer corn. Now, anything that would have Liberty tolerance in it that was planted in 2020, that's not going to be controlled by the Liberty. So, a lot of the AgriSure type products, most of those will have a Liberty tolerance. The Herculex type products, those all have Liberty in there. Smart Stacks, because of the Herculex that's in there, will have Liberty tolerance. So got to be careful. We got to think and make sure that you don't plan on Liberty killing a field of volunteer corn that's actually tolerant. And then on the corn side, we can do the same thing on corn. If we had double pro or conventional corn planted last year in 2020, and then we plant, let's say, a Smart Stack corn or some other corn that has tolerance to Liberty in there, we can spray that Liberty and kill that volunteer corn in that continuous corn situation. Now, continuous corn, the volunteer corn there is not quite as detrimental or yield robbing as it is in soybeans. And a lot of that is because it's going to be under the canopy. That field of corn is going to get up and be above that volunteer corn. And it's the same species. So in a continuous corn environment, we may rob some nitrogen or possibly, moisture from that corn crop. But if that's not an issue, it's just not nearly as yield robbing as it is in soybeans. So soybeans are where we really, really need to focus, on addressing that issue. And, that derecho corn that got plowed under, we hope a lot of that got germinated in the fall of 2020, and it's not going to be an issue, but we really should plan that there's going to be a pretty severe infestation there that we will need to address with a herbicide in 2021.
Okay. Well, talking about this, I think I hear you say at the bottom line is that, volunteer corn control really needs to be built into the plan even before we plant in 2021. And as it relates to the insect pressure we talked about, it sounds like we need to be prepared for an average to above average year. So it's really important that we continue scouting during those proper time frames.
Yeah, and
would you agree?
The planning ahead is to make sure that you have got product reserved and that your retailer, if you're using a retailer to apply, that he knows he's going to throw that volunteer corn chemical in there. These kind of peripheral products can, and especially when we'll have a big outbreak and a big demand for volunteer corn products, they may not be endless on the supply. So it's important that you get that spoken for, so you have it reserved, and just kind of plan on doing it. You can always pull it out of the tank if you scout ahead of time and it's not an issue, but it's going to be hard to put it in the tank if you don't have it. So really important on the planning side.
That's absolutely true, Craig. Well, I hope you stay warm here. Like you said, we've had a one heck of a cold bout here, and until the next time, for our listeners, thanks for joining us again. Thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your week.